This is not the video that people asked for, but it's the one I ended up wanting to make. Being a game about stage plays, it's unavoidable that A3 ends up doing adaptations of existing works. Books, other stage plays, we started with Romeo and Juliet and went on to 1001 Nights, and American history, I'm not gonna. But the genre of A3 adaptations that interests me the most is mystery. Not just mystery itself, but these other two as well. They're from slightly differing time periods. Scarlet Mirror is, of course, Sherlock Holmes, created in 1887. Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, the novel, was published serially from 1909 to 1910, and then mystery isn't really specified to be any one book, but it carries the style of Agatha Christie novels, which are like the 1920s. And they're all handled very interestingly. I originally wanted this to be a comparison of the three of them to their source material and how that affects their quality. I'm still gonna be talking about some differences from the source material and how, like, there's some really weird choices being made in my opinion. Ones that could have helped the theme more or been better parallels for the event story. But also, I ended up thinking way too much, so now we're here! A3's mystery adaptations and its sense of morality. Holy shit, I'm so sorry. Okay, let's start with the one I have the least to say about. I think. I'm gonna level with you here. I hate Sherlock Holmes. Not just this one in specific. I mean, in general, I've never been able to stand the stories with him in them. This has nothing to do with the cringe trademark around Sherlock as a result of that cursed fandom. I just don't like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's writing, I guess. Every so often, I'll think, Scarlet Mirror isn't as bad as I think it is. I just hate Sherlock, so of course I don't like it. And every time I reread it, I think, no, I was right the first time, this is not good. Scarlet Mirror, despite its name, is not based off a study in Scarlet, the first story that Holmes ever appeared in. In terms of plot and structure, what little there is of either, it's closer to Final Problem, which is intended to be the last story with Sherlock Holmes. I don't know why Scarlet Mirror is named for a study in Scarlet despite not being related to it at all. I also don't know why it's not related to it when a study in Scarlet is explicitly about murders committed in the name of vengeance for a lost loved one, which is brought up in the event story? So we're off to a great start. So, Final Problem. It's a short story written by Arthur Conan Doyle with the complete intent of putting an end to Sherlock Holmes because he wanted to pursue other creative endeavors. It's also the very first introduction of Professor Moriarty as a suitable final boss, if you will, to give Holmes a dramatic exit. So Sherlock Holmes is tracking Professor Moriarty, and he's finally going to take this criminal mastermind down, and it will be the peak of his career. He asks Watson to help him since he already escaped like 3 different murder attempts, and he can't do this alone most likely. Sherlock and Watson go on a bunch of trains, and eventually get to Switzerland, because Conan Doyle visited the Reichenbach files while he was there and thought, hey, this is a nice place to kill Sherlock Holmes. Watson gets tricked into going back to the hotel that they were staying at, which allows for Sherlock and Moriarty to meet at the falls and have a dramatic fight and fall off the cliff and die. Watson only finds out about this when he figures out he got tricked and he runs back to the falls, and then for some reason Moriarty is nice enough to let Sherlock write him a last letter? Alright. You can really tell that Arthur Conan Doyle's like, I don't want to write this character anymore, I've outgrown him, I want to do more serious stuff with my career. And sure, it wasn't the end of Sherlock, of course, since he got bullied by the fandom at the time to write more, but the intent here is that Sherlock Holmes is dead, and that's it, folks. Okay, Scarlet Mirror. In Scarlet Mirror, we're introduced to Sherlock Holmes, as he's immediately explaining to a police inspector that the assumption of an everyday robbery is in fact something more sinister, and they should look into it more. We then cut to Holmes, in disguise, visiting Professor Moriarty, who I guess he already found, and they totally don't suspect each other of anything. Watson and Moran run into each other for a bit, which comes in again later. Watson then goes to see Sherlock, but I don't know, Sherlock decides to mess with him for a bit by being in disguise, and he eventually reveals himself and tells Watson that he's gonna be in hiding for a bit because of Moriarty, and that Watson should just stay at home. But Watson's like, no, I want to come along, so he comes along. Yay! As they depart, Moran shows up and tries to kill Holmes, but like he misses, and then Watson recognizes him. Moran goes back to Moriarty, he gets told off, and the police come to Moriarty's place asking about anyone suspicious, which of course he hasn't. Officer, there's no one suspicious in this house. Absolutely not. No. Cut again, Holmes is researching some more when he's interrupted by Moriarty drop in. They have a dramatic sword cane knife fight, while Moriarty does the villain monologue thing and talks about how Holmes might be on the side of justice, but he likes solving crimes like puzzles, and if there are no criminals, then Holmes himself will suffer. Okay. The police, brought in by Watson, burst in and arrest Moriarty, but then of course he escapes immediately after, because duh. Miranda and Watson have a whole thing of, you don't have to be like this, and no, you're too goody-goody, you don't understand. Holmes and Moriarty have another dramatic gun-sword fight with more taunting, then Miranda and Watson show up, then Miranda and Moriarty escape. The end. The details of Scarlet Mirror are different from that of the final problem, but the basic premise is the same. Sherlock Holmes is trying to take down Professor James Moriarty. The Napoleon of crime! They have a bunch of cool fights. The end. In this regard, I think that Scarlet Mirror is faithful to the final problem to a fault. Final Problem is intended to be like a series finale. It's the big dramatic climax to Sherlock Holmes' career and his life. It's the last episode in a long-running line of serialized short stories about this one dude, so of course it's not gonna take any time telling us who these people are, what they're doing, and why. Except, I guess, for Moriarty, who we're supposed to just accept as the new big villain of the week or something. And boy, does Scarlet Mirror feel like the adaptation of an episode of a thing, but without even the finality, that Final Problem has, because neither Sherlock nor Moriarty die or even have any major changes happen to them. The two of them end the play the same way that they started, which isn't necessarily a problem, but nothing of consequence really happens at all. Scarlet Mirror feels like you're getting dropped in the middle of a series that you didn't watch from the very start, and you have no perception of who these characters are or why they're doing anything that they're doing, and so it's a bunch of different scenes and then the play ends. And the one big thing that they did change makes no sense. At the end of the final problem, Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty have their dramatic final battle at Reichenbach Falls, only to drop to their presumed deaths. You'd think that they would have kept this even if you remove the definite dying part, as a lot of adaptations do, since, you know, it's an event starring the Gekkas, one of whom has fallen off a cliff and survived. Hisoka literally has a flashback to falling from the cliff and seeing July in the event story, and it's not even brought up anywhere that Holmes was originally meant to die from falling off a cliff? I don't... How... It's not that hard, A3. How do you fuck it up this bad? Moving on. Oh god, fuck, mystery is gonna make me have a headache too. Okay, here we go. I have a lot of mixed feelings towards mystery. When I first read it, I loved it, and then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, huh? I love mysteries. I grew up reading them. I like the feeling of being able to go, whoa, I figured it out! Watashi wa tensai nano da yo! And as you all might have guessed right now, I really like Winter. They're my favorites. I took one of my names from Alice, so you can imagine how I must have felt when he got a play about mysteries. Wow! Is for me? I love mystery, but I hate mystery, but I love it. It's not a good Alice Lee play, it's not even a good mystery, but the aesthetic is sexy, and if you ever get a chance to watch the stage version, you should, because it's really, really good, and SNU is now and forever one of my favorite A3 songs. But it's a fucking mess. Okay. Mystery is not specifically any one book, it's just vaguely mystery genre, similar in style to Agatha Christie novels. I say that it's not anything in specific, but one time when I was at the library, I was looking through mystery novels, I picked one up, and as I began to read it, I was overcome with a feeling of, oh god, this is a master likes a mystery, isn't it? That novel was Sleeping Murder, the last of Agatha Christie's novels, published after she had passed away. It's the last of the Miss Marple novels, kind of. There are some more before it that are like later on timeline-wise, but it's the last one. And I almost lost it in the library. So, Gwenda Reed, our protagonist, is trying to find a house to move in with her new hubby. She buys a house that feels really homey and familiar, and as she starts figuring out renovations, she starts getting these spooky visions of things that are actually in the house, like covered up wallpaper and a sealed up doorway. She goes to see a play with some relatives, including Miss Marple, our nice little old investigating lady, and when the line, "Cover her face, mine eyes dazzle, she died young," is spoken, Gwenda has a memory of seeing a man saying that while strangling a woman on the staircase of her new house. As it turns out, as a child, Gwenda had lived in that house with her father and his second wife Helen, who was the woman she'd seen getting murdered. She takes it upon herself to find the truth, as her father was the one accused of doing it and died completely believing that he had. Helen was mostly raised by her older half-brother, Dr. Kennedy, who responds to Gwenda and her husband trying to find info on what happened and gives his assistance. This is the point where I started thinking, okay, cool, so it's him, right? There's a few red herrings or suspects, including a guy who used to have a thing with Helen and was poor, but now that he's gotten into money is a real jerk, and a lawyer who proposed to Helen and had gotten turned down, and despite his kinda weak, timid behavior, feels like he has an undercurrent of violence through him. For a second, I actually got tricked. Maybe my gut feeling was wrong, but no, as it turns out, it was Dr. Kennedy, because of course it was. He's overbearing and overprotective, and he wanted to keep his sister from running away and marrying a man she loved, and finally getting away from him So he killed her while saying that drama line, which is so much. What the fuck? He almost murders Gwenda too while she's figuring this out, and it finally clicks for her just as he's like, "Why did you meddle in this, you darn kid?" But Miss Marple shows up and sprays water in the doctor's eyes. And just like any good Miss Marple novel, she explains everything that was happening because she figured out the entire case just like in the background. Gwenda and her husband go back to their new house, and she no longer feels the spirit of the poor murdered lady, just a house that likes them and that they can live in together. Okay, so do I need to recount mystery, or is this already enough? I'm gonna do it anyway, just to be sure. Tojo Shiki is bored and has nothing to do, so he goes out for a walk with his butler, Sagishima, and they come across a handkerchief that belongs to the lady of the Kusanagi household. They go up to return it to her, but by the time they arrive, she's dead on the ground. The suspects for the murder are Soma Keiichi, her fiancé, and Kusanagi Shizuma, her older brother. Sagi and Shiki get a threat to stop investigating, which came from Keiichi. Keiichi was in fact only going to marry Kusanagi-jo for her money and did not love her, and fooled around with other women behind her back. But naturally this means that he would not have killed her before getting a cent of that money. So it's not him. In this time, Shiki and Shizuma have been making good friends and reading books together, and Sagi asks Shiki if he's gonna give up looking for the culprit, to which Shiki responds with, "No, of course not." And it's at that point that he has the horrible realization that the books Shizuma lent him have the same scent as Kusanagi-jo's handkerchief, and if Keiichi is not the murderer, then logically, it must be Shizuma. Shiki goes to confront him. Shizuma explains that he and his sister had a fight over Keiichi. Goes, "And I would have gotten away with it too, if it weren't for you meddling kid and your dumb butler." And Shiki makes sad pouty faces at Shizuma as he goes to turn himself in. Sagi reasons that because Kusanagi-jo didn't have any signs of struggle on her and that she'd been stabbed from the front, that Shizuma was lying. They did not fight, but rather Kusanagi-jo accepted death at her brother's hands instead of marrying somebody she didn't love. The end, I guess. Stage version has some variation on this, where Sagishima's explanation is delivered directly to Shizuma as he's walking away, and has some actual flower language symbolism for the scent on the handkerchief, but in terms of the actual mystery, it's the same. So rereading these to make the summaries made me even more mad at mystery. Like I said, it's not confirmed to be any one specific book, but Sleeping Murder is like startlingly similar. If anyone knows of any mysteries from the same time period that are more likely to be what mystery is based off of, feel free to suggest them in the comments. Because I do not want Sleeping Murder to be what mystery is based off of. Mysteries always kind of felt like, wow, they sure did put that in an A3 play, huh? With how the Kusanagis are as characters, and for the most part you can hand wave it away with it being a thing that happened in mystery fiction for the time period, which it was, but looking at it next to Sleeping Murder kind of makes it feel worse. In Sleeping Murder, the victim is viewed with pity. She wanted to live freely, and her brother took that opportunity away from her. We're intended to sympathize with a young woman whose life was taken from her by a man who viewed her as his property. Meanwhile, in Mystery, it's like, oh, it's all cool, because that's what she wanted him to do. Probably, we assume. Never mind the fact that Keiichi was lying about his social standing, and the reason he was marrying Kusanagi-sis, and that neither Shizuma nor Kusanagi-jo herself wanted the wedding to go through, so there's basically no reason for her to die if the ones with power here are the Kusanagi family, but okay, sure, she'd rather die, okay, I guess. Last one, The Phantom of the Opera. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to refer to the novel/musical as Phantom and the A3 version as Kaijin F. I know that in A3N it was just Le Fantôme de l'Opéra, but I don't think I can consistently distinguish Phantom from Fantôme with the amount of times I'm gonna have to say it, so Kaijin F it is. The Phantom of the Opera is a novel by French author Gaston Leroux about the Paris Opera House, which is definitely being haunted by a ghost. Yep, a ghost. It's written from the perspective of a journalist who is trying to find out what happened at the opera house because there was a bunch of fucked up shit happening, like people dying and stuff. Since it was published serially, it was like, you know, a mystery. Who's causing all the spooky stuff? Is it the managers? Is it Miss Christine's stupid childhood sweetheart? Is it the scary guy who lives in the basement? Who knows? The version of it that you watching right now are probably familiar with is the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, The Phantom of the Opera. You know, the one that goes... It goes pretty much the same way too, as do a lot of other Phantom adaptations. Spooky stuff happens at the theater, little ingenue Christine starts singing there, spooky guy does more spooky stuff for Christine, chaos ensues. I don't want to go into all of this, so I'm gonna leave a link in the description for a video that does talk in more detail about different adaptations of Phantom. I just think it's interesting to compare different works that have the same source material. A3's rendition of Phantom, Kaijin F to Nageki no Opera, goes about the same way as well. Chris is a singer at the opera who isn't all that good yet, and he befriends Eric, a ghost, living in the theater who has a beautiful singing voice. Chris ends up having Eric sing for him as he performs, and it turns out that the current manager of the opera tried to kill Eric, and that's why he lives in the basement now. Chris decides to help Eric uncover what happened to him with the help of Raul, his childhood friend, and Philippe, Raul's older brother and the previous manager. There's a big confrontation, and though Chris would want for Eric not to take vengeance and to keep his song in the world, Eric pushes Richard into the fire. Yep. Also, the opera house burns down. Hooray! To be honest with you, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about Kaijin F. I've never been all that fond of the Phantom of the Opera, but like, Winter doing a well-done musical? Fuck yeah, dude! But after a lot of time, I've come to the conclusion that Kaijin F is fine as its own thing, just not as an adaptation of the Phantom of the Opera. In Phantom, everyone's kind of a terrible person in some way aside from Christine. The managers are neglectful, Raoul is dumb and doesn't believe his terrified girlfriend when she's afraid for her life. Even Madame Giry is like just letting the Phantom stay in the basement even though he straight up kills people. Meanwhile in Kaijin F, pretty much everyone is free of sin but the manager. Raoul instead believes Chris right off the bat. Philippe, who is actually taking Madame Giry's place in the story, freely offers his assistance and knowledge as the former manager. And the only person that the Phantom wants to hurt is the dude who tried to kill him, and he's still even kinda hesitant about that! I find that Liberant are just kind of Phantom apologists overall, since aichuu's version, Operaza no Akuma, had a similar interpretation. There, the Phantom was a little hikikomori meow meow who had a crush on the new singer girl, and the managers were literal demons feeding off misery. At some point, you just gotta wonder if there's a writer at Liberant who has it out for their managers in Phantom. Kaijin F's characters being less willfully aichuu does make for a better experience. It's much less frustrating to see people help Chris when he's trying to support Eric and all, but I feel like this dilutes the story. The Phantom of the Opera, at its core, is a story about the cruelty of man to those who are deemed different. The Phantom could have been one of the great minds of our time, but because he was treated as a monster, he became one. It's only through the kindness of one person, who shows him affection that even his own mother never did, that he starts to think, oh damn, maybe I shouldn't keep murdering people. In Kaijin F, there isn't really space for this, since everyone else around the Phantom is pretty nice, actually. It's just the one dude who tried to kill him that's bad. You lose the ambiguity of there not being one person at fault in favor of having a clear-cut villain. Now you might ask, who cares? There's tons of bad adaptations of the Phantom of the Opera out there that totally miss the point. And there are! But Kaijin S doesn't even fit thematically with Act 8. For comparison, let's look at aichuu's. Operaza no Akuma was written by Utakata Airu, Arce's manager at a time when he was at his peak hubris, right before metaphorically falling into the sea and disappearing for years. Of course, the writer self-insert is gonna be a good boy who did nothing wrong and everybody actually likes him, but he's just in the basement. The ending is originally supposed to be tragic, just like its source material, but he changes it, because by the time it's being performed by the units he's managing, they've helped him realize that he doesn't have to distance himself and live in misery, and that he can live in the light, as it were. In Kaijin F, when it's discovered that Richard was behind Eric's disappearance, pretty much everyone turns on him? We, as an audience, are shown that no one is siding with the evil, horrible, bad man, and when you compare it to Act 8, that seems kind of insensitive. Yes, it's Gai-san's stepfather who made him believe he was an android, that he wasn't human, but what of Gai-san's mother? And the other guards to the Zaran royal family? Gee, if only Act 8 was doing a play where the main character was mistreated by everyone around him, showing that the true monster was man, to parallel Gai-san, as a child, being manipulated by one person, sure, but also basically everybody else around him except for one person who was nice to him. Wow, that would have been perfect! Especially seeing as Acts 5 to 7 have no problem with drawing close to their lead's real problems, with Hatsukoi Koshien going so far as to directly take from Kumon's experiences within the event story itself. I guess this is good a time as any to go back to the topic I said this video was gonna handle. A3's sense of morality. At this point, you might have noticed that my common complaint, if only for Scarlet Mirror and Kaijin F, has been that they tend not to go any deeper than good guy, good, bad guy, bad, when it comes to their protagonists and antagonists. But of course, you say, this is a stupid tap-tap anime joseimuka game. Of course it's not gonna handle anything more subtle than clear-cut hero and villain. And I say, yeah, I don't expect much from A3 act addict actors, but let's take a look at it this way, shall we? A3 generally has a more simplistic view than most of its contemporaries. Take some other games alongside it. Ents and Mahoyaku are a bit more extreme on the side of everyone in this cast is fucked up in some way or another, and Twisty is literally Disney villains but as high schoolers with anxiety. So I think it's more than fair to ask for even a little bit more from a mobile game that's about theater. You know, one of the ancient forms of storytelling, where we explore things like human behavior and relationships in a way that puts you, the audience, in the same room as what is happening. Now, there's an exception to the plays that I've brought up here, and it is unfortunately mystery. Out of these three, Kusanagi Shizuma is the one antagonist where there is an attempt in story to make him seem sympathetic, to have him not purely be a villain. He has murdered his sister, yes, but that's fine, but that's what she wanted, right? To die in the arms of her brother rather than marry some bitch-ass fuckboy. This brings me to my next point about A3, which I can explain with the history of one idiom. By now I'm sure that we all know the phrase blood is thicker than water was originally the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. That is to say, a phrase which is commonly used to mean that your ties to your biological family are stronger than that of your friends originally meant the exact opposite. And that's basically what it feels like seeing A3, a game that is allegedly about found family, constantly pushing plotlines that imply that biological family is always more important. This is far more obvious in Last Planet, but that would be a whole nother video, and I refuse to read Act 11 and 12 until they're on the wiki, so I'm focusing on mysteries, but believe me when I say this isn't the only place that they appear. Shizuma is forgiven for his crimes because he's family, because the blood that runs through him in Kusanagi-jo is the same. The same reasoning goes for Tachibana Yukio and every other family member in A3 with questionable actions who doesn't earn the forgiveness of those they've wronged. Good is good and evil is evil, unless evil is family, in which case they've done nothing wrong at all. Man, I didn't record an outro the first time I did this, and I kind of wanted to re-record it on the new mic just because of that, but like, honestly, I don't want to think about this any more than I already have. Just, the point is, why A3 like that? Why it be like that? Tomothy A3, fight me behind the 7-Eleven downstairs, I swear to God. Thanks for watching. This one is like stupidly long, and I hope that it actually comes out this year, the year that I recorded it, instead of, I don't know, in 2023 or something. Again, if you want to hear more from me, I don't know, message me on Twitter or something.